Hey everybody, welcome to Formula Relapse. And as the name of the channel might suggest, we mainly cover Formula One, but I made it a mission to watch the first NASCAR season opener race at the LA Coliseum. It was hosted this Sunday, and I just wanted to check it out. I've never seen NASCAR before, and I just wanted to kind of like see what it was all about. And so I tuned in. And it was a very, very different experience from what I'm used to with F1. With F1, the format is usually, the race is uninterrupted, goes straight into it, and it's a pure race for 2 hours. It looked like format for at least the Coliseum. I don't know if this is the format for the rest of the season races. I think they're called Cup Series, and in this case, it was the Busch Light Clash at the LA Coliseum. And it was here in Los Angeles, and it was one of the shortest tracks to date. And so it was pretty interesting to see how they were doing an oval race in such a tiny track. When I first saw it, I kind of laughed because I didn't think it would be possible to do something like this. There was 20 cars on the track. It looked like the stadium was healthy full. It had plenty of fans there. Of course, I saw a bunch of tank tops and short shorts worn by men, of course. And so it's really funny because it looks like, I've seen that Channel 5 video where he goes to Daytona. I think it's Daytona or maybe it's Talladega. And it's like they dress just like this. And so it was really funny to see kind of that stereotype played out on the TV a bunch. And at least that's who the camera focused on. Maybe that's not the entire fan base, but that was who the camera focused on. And so, from a Formula One fan perspective, I think it was still pretty enjoyable. The race was very interesting in the sense that it was so short. I think I saw that in qualifying they were doing like 16-second laps, which is pretty insane. And I think they were doing sub 16-second laps. I'm still not very familiar with any of the drivers. Of course, I know Kyle Busch for obvious reasons, and I know Bubba Wallace, and I know, and I guess now today I have become familiar with, I think his name was Joey Logano. He's the one that won the race this today. And so it was definitely a pretty interesting race in the sense that it was broken up into two 75-lap races. And it looks like none of the yellow flag sessions, so I guess they call it a caution flag, none of the laps that they do during that actually count towards those 150 laps. And so there were a few incidents that happened during the race that caused that to happen. But it was cool to kind of see each of these restarts because at the restarts, everything got a little spicy. A bunch of people either lost or gained positions. And so it was definitely very interesting to kind of catch that and just see all this happen in such a small track. Another thing that I really enjoyed about it was, because this is a much smaller track, there was a lot of back markers. So immediately, after the session had been going for a while, it was pretty interesting to see the leaders catch up to the back markers so quick. And I think this is kind of like IndyCar, where you don't necessarily have to yield to the race leaders. And so I saw that some of the back markers were kind of giving them some trouble in terms of like being able to pass them. And so I think that's a really cool aspect of racing, because now you don't have these kind of blue flags where they come out and you just kind of have to make way. You kind of have to fight for that position still. But obviously, I mean, if you're a back marker, that means you're very slow or you're not this comfortable in the track. And so, I mean, it should be generally pretty easy to take over. But in terms of very interesting moments, I don't think there were too many. I think this track didn't really live up to its hype in the sense that there was going to be a ton of crashes. Because I know I didn't watch qualifying, but from what I was able to hear and read, it seemed like qualifying was just really insane with a lot of crashes going on. I did anticipate that. I think as a NASCAR fan, you do want to kind of see a couple of crashes, barring no one gets hurt, right? But it was pretty bland, I think. But I think there was a lot to it that let me learn the sport a little easier. It let me kind of get a groove of what a NASCAR race looks like. But I think more importantly, one thing that I didn't really like about the NASCAR format was all of the commercial breaks. It was insane. I haven't seen this many commercials, and I can't remember how long. So it was pretty interesting to kind of see that Busch Light commercial where, it has the eagle sounds and it's like, Busch Light, be sure to drink a beer down in the mountains. And so it was pretty funny to see all of that, hear all of the American names. This event was just extremely American, and it was just pretty awesome to see that, because I know when we're watching F1 stuff, it's usually very British oriented, from the commentator's perspective. But then the rest of it is people from across the globe. And so, we don't really have a lot of American representation other than the Haas team. And when I say just the Haas team, I literally mean just the team itself. There's not a lot of American representation over in F1. And so it was pretty interesting to kind of get the whole encapsulated American experience of I think they were selling like prescriptions. So there was like advertisements of prescriptions. There was advertisements of beer, the Geico commercial, of course, very infamous commercials. And so it was pretty cool to kind of see that, but it did kind of feel like the Super Bowl for me, where, there's so many commercials, and that's kind of part of the experience. And so I think that kind of soured it just a little bit because there were so many commercials. But, for my first NASCAR race, seeing the beginning to the end, I rated a solid 7 out of 10. And I think the track had to do with a little bit of that. I think, some of the next tracks that we're going to be, I think the next race is Daytona 500. I think that one's definitely going to be a lot more interesting. And so I'm cutting NASCAR just a little bit of slack just to kind of see what happens kind of with a race like that, with a much bigger track where people are actually able to get those top speeds. Here they get to kind of top speed for a little bit, and then they've got to brake and turn that corner. And so a lot of on-track action happened here. I think at one point there was like a few people going like 3 wide, which is pretty cool to see on such a small track. And so, overall, I think my very first NASCAR race that I've seen from the beginning to end, I think it was pretty interesting. And yeah, I definitely look forward to seeing the next ones.